Thank you. I recognize the Minister for Communications and Works, Honourable Rymer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today I lend my voice to the debate on the Police Amendment Bill 2024. And Madam Speaker, we know this legislation, it's critical for enhancing our law enforcement capabilities here in the Virgin Islands. And as mentioned, the bill seeks to address the deficiencies highlighted in the mutual evaluation report that was done by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And they pointed out quite a few gaps in our legal system, and hence this bill is before this Honourable House. Now members would have gone into various aspects of and concerns pertaining to what would happen with this bill. But the private objective of this amendment is to enhance the capabilities, as I mentioned, of our law enforcement agencies and ensure that they are equipped with the necessary tools necessary to combat modern criminal activities, and most importantly, establish clear legal framework for the investigative practices and these things which were usually done under common law within our judicial system. Madam Speaker, I mentioned common law. What is common law? I think common law refers to a body of unwritten laws based on legal precedent established by the courts. Somebody said bush law, but in the Virgin Islands, Madam Speaker, common law has been derived from English law, as I understand, and applies in areas where there is no specific legislation. So this means that the law enforcement practices and procedures, Madam Speaker, are often relied on by judicial interpretation and past rulings. And sometimes this leads to inconsistencies and lack of clarity. So, Madam Speaker, I think by placing specific provisions now into the Police Act, as was stipulated by this report, we move from a system based on general precedent to now a more structural legal framework that is explicit, and it outlines rules, it outlines procedures, and these are what the law enforcement agencies must follow. Madam Speaker, I think it's crucial, I think it's important for law enforcement, now speaking more so to the police, that their practices are clear, their practices are consistent and accountable. Madam Speaker, the bill aims to regulate these investigative techniques, and they're listed: the controlled deliveries, covert operations, electronic surveillance. Madam Speaker, you would have heard the Junior Minister for Tourism speak about those techniques: controlled deliverables, covert operations, and the electronic surveillance. Now, Madam Speaker, with the controlled deliverables, this technique allows the law enforcement agencies to permit a package containing illegal goods, such as drugs, and they allow it to be delivered to a suspect. She called it a sting operation. The goal is to catch that suspect in the act of receiving that package. Then members spoke about various things as to how it's labeled. Then the COVID operations. And the electronic surveillance. Now this is one that we need to make sure all the processes are in place. And it involves using technologies such as the cameras, listening devices, and even now you see the police with the body-worn cameras and so forth. And you would hear that, if these things are done correctly, they serve to increase transparency and accountability in police actions as they operate. Madam Speaker, the bill aims to clarify the admissibility of evidence obtained through these investigative techniques, thereby reinforcing or hopefully making sure that there's integrity in our judicial system. But Madam Speaker, as an honorable House, we must refine it, as it's our duty and it's imperative that we highlight the key issues and concerns that must be addressed when we're implementing the aspects of this bill as to not infringe upon the rights of our citizens. We spoke a lot about human rights, and our Constitution provides robust protections for human rights that should be upheld. And Madam Speaker, these protections, they are very important. They are crucial to guard against potential abuses that will arise from these expanded powers of the police. So we must ensure that these rights do not violate fundamental rights of our people. Speaker, I'll list a few: rights to privacy, rights to due process, rights to freedom, discrimination, rights to freedom of expression. These new techniques where persons want to be able to go out there and protest and do so forth, they are not deterred by these new techniques. Right to security. So we must make sure that these expanded powers do not infringe on those rights, and we'll make sure of that as we go to the committee stage. Madam Speaker, we must make sure the covert investigation in this bill, they are not unilateral. Officers cannot simply just go and initiate these covert operations at will, as the bill stipulates that they must obtain permission. And there is a time limit as to how long this should last. I mean, it sounds good, Madam Speaker. It's written, and these operations, can only to be employed when evidence cannot be obtained through other means. So as the junior minister mentioned, there's a lengthy process that you go through to be able to do such an operation. And Madam Speaker, there are multiple layers in place, multiple checks and balances. So if someone go out and obtain evidence, you know, and the DPP gets the information, the DPP has the right to refuse, scrutinize, and make sure that this evidence, the way it was obtained, cannot be used as evidence. The DPP plays a significant role also in how this is done. And there's also courts should maintain the integrity of this, because the court, they also are watchdogs and ensure how this evidence is. Madam Speaker, as we go through this bill, I think it's necessary for us to make sure that the law enforcement agencies, the police, make sure that they're, you know, properly vetted and make sure that they have the right scruples to be able to carry out these amended powers. And we would have, members would have spoken about the law review, volume 1, and all that it entailed. I think it was 170 different recommendations. And we are anticipating that volume 2 would be over 200 recommendations. Now, what would that say for the police force or the law enforcement agencies? So that in itself would be a determining factor as to where we move forward with this new police act. And, you know, we must instill and make sure that the police force, they're disciplined with clear protocols as to how they conduct their affairs. And it shouldn't be done in isolation. You know, they should operate under the oversight of the law. And, you know, must be accountable to the judicial system. We've gone through some scenarios where, you know, there is an internal process where police officers are addressed with their behavior and so forth. But I think it needs to be under the judicial system. Madam Speaker, now we speak about this Police Amendment Act that is before us today. Since I've been elected, I think this has been on the agenda for maybe 3 or 4 times and various other papers. And it just fall off. Madam Speaker, my thing, as I've been in this house, and you know, we had the experience of the Commission of Inquiry, and the way it was called, we had all these recommendations where one person came in and told us that we need to do all these different things. For years, we've heard that the police bill needs to be amended. And it's now being done through a report through a financial means. Madam Speaker, we speak about building our institutions. We speak about where we want to be for this honorable house. We know what should be done. And it shouldn't take for others to tell us what we should do. These things need to be addressed. And this is the right place that we need to sit and hash them out. We speak about hearing from our constituents. These things affect us all, and we need to hash them out. Madam Speaker, if we don't do this police bill, I'm sure somebody else will do it for us in a manner probably we wouldn't like. So we are here. I think we should work to address it the best way possible that wouldn't infringe on anyone's right. I know the last amendment came through. We met with the police. They spoke about the need to add DNA to the law. We did that. What came out of that? They assured us that they would take some criminal off the street, but I'm not sure what the outcome of that was. But we still must make sure that we work to give the police the tools that they need in order to carry out their duties. But we must balance crime prevention and our individual rights. Madam Speaker, we must address serious crime, but we must also be mindful of those who are merely alleged to have committed offenses. The stigma of being accused of a crime, Madam Speaker, would lead to whether victimization, damage to one's reputation, even if that person was given due process and was found innocent. So, Madam Speaker, it's necessary for us to strike the balance between empowering the law enforcement agencies and protecting individual rights. Madam Speaker, I reflect on back in the 2000s in America, where the police had a new initiative where they were trying to curb serious crime. They started some called stop and frisk. It turned out to be basically unconstitutional because they targeted more, it was more so racially motivated. And that, Madam Speaker, caused a rift within the community. We now see what is happening with Black Lives Matter and those things in America. So we must make sure that whatever powers are granted to law enforcement, it does not lead to similar issues. And Madam Speaker, the concerns were raised, quite a lot of concerns, and they're legitimate. And is this fair between the police and the public that we need to work to marry? Because the police do have a role to play, but you can't go and infringe on someone's right. And even though the Constitution mentions it. So there are concerns about, like I said, the misuse of the investigative powers. And without the proper oversight and accountability mechanisms in place, there will be risk to these. So, Madam Speaker, I won't rehash or go into what the bill states, but there was one thing mentioned by the member for the 6th in his extensive research where he spoke about an independent oversight committee. And I think that could be somewhere incorporated into the bill. We could create a body that would be tasked with monitoring the police activities, particularly concerning the use of these new powers, the covert operations and the surveillance. This commission, Madam Speaker, should operate autonomously from the law enforcement agencies, and they should have the authority to investigate complaints and also review the police practices. This commission should also be able to do the reports and have them published, including the statistics on the police and the operations and complaints received. I think this transparency would foster more public confidence in our law enforcement agencies. This commission would probably do community engagement as well. Also, it would have a clear complaint and accountability mechanism in place. Could even do audits on some of the police practices. Madam Speaker, I say this because, you know, the police just can't stand alone. I think, you know, it was mentioned that this is done in the United Kingdom, that they do have a similar body in place. So I would suggest that this be something to consider as we go through the committee stage. And Madam Speaker, you know, as I wrap up, I do think that in addition to the oversight mechanisms, certain things should also be included to protect the rights in this bill. For instance, the right to legal counsel, the informed consent requirements, so that they're aware and they give in the absence of a warrant, they can agree to do searches and the person. Mandatory recording of interaction, I think that should also be there in order to add to transparency. I'm not sure if this would be in a regulation, but there should be guidelines to how these covert operations are done. And also, there should be a right to appeal. And data protection should be something that should be also mandated, because in the law it says that basically the chief of police, he would be the one holding this information. But it doesn't, it's kind of vague. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say much as to the powers he would have, where he would hold it. Now suppose the chief of police becomes somebody who, you know, is a narcissist or something, and he just carry home all this information. How would we get access to it? So I think all that should be clearly or explicit as to how these things would be done. And as the leader of the opposition mentioned, we have persons that spend multiple years in jail for various things, and when you come to find out they were innocent, exonerated. I think compensation should be also clearly articulated as to how this would work for persons wrongfully accused and had their rights violated. So, Madam Speaker, like I say, in the UK, this independent police commission, it serves as a robust framework for ensuring accountability and also public trust. And I think we should definitely consider that. So, Madam Speaker, as we go to the committee stage, there are quite a lot to go through and make sure that we make this the right bill for us as a people, but also make sure that we give the police the authority, but also give them they put the mechanisms in place so that they can carry out their duties in the right manner, and so that we can commit to fairness and commit to transparency, and as its own moral imperative as a jurisdiction to protect human rights, but also to be able to uphold law and order. Madam Speaker, thank you.